Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inspiring Hope. I'm your host, Lois Hermann, here to celebrate people who are making a difference in our world. And today I have a couple of very wonderful people with me. Specifically, Dr. Melanie Salmon is here. She's the author of There Has to Be Another Way and has a fascinating story. And we're going to be spotlighting her story and her quantum energy coaching program. I also have my wonderful partner, Scott, with me, who has experience with Dr. Melanie's programs and knows her personally. And then also Julie, who has experienced both Dr. Melanie's programs and our programs. So it's going to be a fun discussion. Dr. Melanie, will you tell us just a little bit about who you are and how you ended up coming up with this fascinating another way of healing?
There has to be another way, yes. Well, that was the comment that I almost did on a daily basis at the dinner table. I'm a medical doctor and I was a general practitioner for about 35 years in Britain, which is where I live and work. And I used to come home frustrated and really, really desperate. I used to say to my husband every night, there has to be another way. This is not working. Medicine is not working. We're living in a time where medical science is improving all the time, and yet patients are getting sicker, not better. And he said to me, that will be the title of your book one day. So, of course, when I wrote my life story, it had to be the title, There Has to Be Another Way. So, yes, I actually escaped from medicine. I left. I took early retirement about 17 years ago and left both medicine, and I'd also trained as a Gestalt psychotherapist. So I was doing that, not with my GP patients, but doing that at night. So I had two careers, really. And I think I went into the coaching counseling career because I was desperate that medicine wasn't working. And the problem for me in the Gestalt, as much as it's a beautiful a way of working, it was too slow. I found that people were still coming to see me after 5 years, and their problems had really only shifted so much, and it took an immense amount of investment financially and time-wise. So there had to be another way for me as well in the coaching sphere. So I left both, really, and created my own method, which I call quantum energy coaching. And I was able to do this thanks to discovering and reading the book by Bruce Lipton called The Biology of Belief, in which the new information scientifically came through that when we are counseling and coaching, we're using the small computer of our rational mind. And it's a tiny, tiny computer compared to our subconscious mind. And I went, I know what I need to do. I need to find a way to work with the subconscious mind, with that big computer. So that was really, in essence, my journey. The other way was me finding a way, which I called quantum energy coaching. That's the way to work with the subconscious mind. And do we see transformation with that? That really is the other way, for me anyway.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here, for sharing, and for taking everything that you've learned and creating another way. I come from a medical background as well, and I, like you, had two careers, left the medical, and have focused on hypnosis, which is the subconscious mind. However, I've taken the hypnosis and married it with the spiritual aspect of the hypnosis. So working with the subconscious and what I consider to be the superconscious mind. So working in that realm, we have such a similar background, and I'm fascinated by the work you're doing. And I've just started experiencing it myself, which I'm very impressed with. And having read your book, I am so impressed with how similar our backgrounds are, our history is. So we're going to go into that in a minute, but I'd like to introduce our other friends here. Julie, I'm not so familiar with you, but Scott and Melanie are. I'm going to spotlight you. Could you tell us a little bit about you and why you're here with us today? Because for some reason you were invited.
Yeah, so I think I class myself as a friend of Dr. Salmon. I've known her now for nearly 5 years, and I came to QEC because I was struggling in my own life, in my work life, once I'd sort of delved into the realm of QEC, I was like, oh, this is really powerful, and I want to be a practitioner. So I got trained as a practitioner, and even though my day job is to be an accountant, which it conflicts with really the subconscious mind and the way that we sort of tap into that and change beliefs and deal with trauma. I can just marry those two at the moment. So that's how I came to QEC, and I love working with it. It's very empowering for the individual to know that they can change and they can see that, and it's just so subtle. The changes that take place are sort of imperceptible. Sometimes it's really difficult for the person to sort of notice that change and be consciously aware of it because it's at the subconscious mind level. So it's really powerful, and I really do love being a practitioner as well as doing my day job. And then just recently came into Scott and your organisation, came into my awareness, and I had a really powerful energy clearing, and I really loved that experience. And I would say that I'm on the journey to discovering more about you and your organisation, Lois, and I'm very intrigued and also very excited. It just feels a time of excitement now to have, different modalities and different learnings. So yes, that's a bit about me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for being here, for joining us, and for being courageous enough to explore different modalities. And that's what it takes sometimes, is the courage to, this isn't working. I need to find another way. I need to do something to help myself be the best I can be. So thank you for being here. This takes us to Mr. Scott. So I'm going to spotlight you, and if you'd like to share how you came to be in this realm and how you're connected with Dr. Melanie.
Well, I didn't ever plan to be here. I've said that many times on your podcast. I was directed to you through many synchronicities, so it was definitely meant to be over 2 years ago now. And then experienced energy clearing and realized, this is something I need to be doing. It just felt completely right. And a year and a half later, through a lot of training and experience, yes, doing it now. And so I worked with Julie and I worked with Melanie. I've experienced QEC through another practitioner that Melanie has trained and who's a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, but never worked directly with Melanie except for in the energy clearing. But I've experienced the QEC and that was powerful. And the energy clearing work, of course, I love. I do it now. It's kind of a part-time part of my life, and a lot of my life is leadership coaching and executive coaching and mentoring coaches. And I can definitely see how this work will become more prevalent because there is such a need out there for all of the work that we do for coaching and the QEC, that level of coaching, and then the energy clearing, so the hypnosis as well. I'm a certified consulting hypnotist. I also lead clients on journeys through hypnosis into their past lives, into potentially prior times in their current life to help them resolve that, make peace with that, reprogram their subconscious. So I love the fact now that all of my work is involving with the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, or even the superconscious mind, as you called it, and also multiple dimensions. And I see my cat is wanting to look outside. So,
He's looking into another dimension there.
I think so, yeah. Well, she's always in between dimensions, I think.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well,
That's
thank
a little
you for
bit about
being
me.
here, for joining us today. And so I'm going to remove the spotlight and let's just have a conversation. One of the things that we were talking about was how similar a lot of the work that you do, Melanie, involves trauma. Is that correct? Is that almost like the niche that you work with, is people who are struggling with different types of trauma?
Exactly. When I started off, I was really working on the outside layer of people's problems, trying to change limiting beliefs using the power of the subconscious mind simply to do that. I had no idea that I was going to be moving more and more into the area of trauma. And, this has been an organic following a path and following the need really out there. It hasn't been driven by some, kind of rational decision. I've just followed the need. And because I'm South African and I went back to retire in South Africa in 2009, I just developed QEC. I was actually going to retire. I wasn't really going to do any work. But unfortunately, or fortunately, perhaps is perhaps the better word, I met David Baselli, Dr. David Baselli, who developed trauma release exercises. And I was so blown away by the process that I took it to South Africa and became the national trainer for trauma release exercises throughout South Africa, and spent the next 9 years traveling around the country, taking this exercise and working with hundreds of people in townships, in poor situations, in situations of extreme trauma. And for the first time as a medical doctor, I began to see trauma. And I was shocked that I knew so little about it. It was like, why didn't I know about this? Why didn't I learn about this? Why do I have to wait for somebody called David Baselli to teach me about trauma? And so I became absolutely fascinated and then dedicated to taking my work. Once I'd finished doing trauma release exercises with people, I wanted then to move on and bring trauma as the focus into helping people transform their lives by changing the wiring in the brain that trauma creates. Trauma and childhood conditioning under the age of 7 create permanent wiring in a different area of the brain, as you probably know, Lois. But most people don't realize that. And so you can't just get well from trauma. You actually have to have help to change that wiring. And so my process does that. And so, yes, that's just about all I ever do these days. I hardly work on anything else. There's so much trauma on the planet, and luckily I can do it online. So I'm working globally. Yeah.
That's wonderful that you can do this online. And you're right, the trauma is so prevalent, and trauma is different things to different people. Trauma because I've done a lot of work with trauma as well, because of my background. That's been a focus that I've had through hypnosis and NLP work. However, mine kind of moved into the spiritual aspect of trauma, because when our vibrational frequency lowers, we end up becoming targets for spiritual, really lost souls or spiritual attacks. Not all of them are evil. A lot of them are just looking for an energy source. And a lot of spirits come to help the traumatized person. So if there's a spirit in the unseen world that did not, for whatever reason, go into the light, they may come to help a child that's been traumatized, and then they stay with that person their whole life. So as we work on helping to heal the trauma that the person has gone through, what we're finding is it's also important to help heal and rescue any spirits that might be around the traumatized person. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I only came across what you do very recently, and talking about in the last 2 months. I had no idea that there could be clearance of one's energy field, until I found myself in a crisis situation where I had been attacked by something. And luckily, through synchronistic connections of people that we know, I found myself seeing Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And was absolutely riveted with fascination that these, I mean, it all fitted, and it was all right. I really did understand what was going on, and I knew it was correct, that yes, I had certain things in my energy field that needed to be cleared. And the extraordinary thing for me was the experience of that clearance. How just immediately at the end of that session, I mean, the session didn't last more than about an hour. At the end of that session, I felt my energy going from something that was very traumatic to as high as I think I've ever known it. And I walked around in a state of intense peace and serenity for the next week. It was quite remarkable. And I haven't really dropped much from that. That's 2 months ago. And I've stayed pretty good since then, I have to say. And because it was so profoundly a shift for me, and I realized how important this work is that you do. I've been sending just about everybody that seems to have a similar kind of problem to me that I can't help with my brain changing trauma work. I mean, it is sort of almost a, what should we call it, a partnership that you and I might be setting up here, because I'm kind of working within the body and you're working just outside of it. But we need both, and there are different approaches.
What I found early on, or actually over a period of years of working with doing a lot of the basic hypnosis techniques to relieve the trauma, is I was healing the spirits. And now what I do is like, okay, let's identify the spirits first, get them in a safe place, and now we can work on the person. So what's happened is my business, Scott, with my team, has really been focused on the energy work, because the work we do is fairly unique. And so I would prefer to work to help clear the spirits and then send the person. And I've actually referred a couple of people to you as well, to you, that they can help with the trauma imprint in the mind. Yes, I know some techniques, but your technique is so amazingly efficient and you have such skill in it that I would prefer to let us do what we do best, and then have people come to you for what you do best.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you so much for saying that. It's really interesting how quickly this has come about, and it feels to me very, very much guided. What I've appreciated so much is the interesting also discovery that my guide and your guide are one and the same.
So Michael kind of gets around.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, thank you. Thank
So
you for that.
Scott, you've done some work with several of the clients that Dr. Melanie has referred to us. And Julie, you're willing to share that you're one of them. So Scott, what are you finding as these clients that are coming to you that have done the trauma work that Dr. Salmon has developed? And then what are you finding in the type of work that we do? How does that complement one another?
Well, I think the first thing is that every single person senses something's off,
Mm.
right? They know there's something off. They feel it, whether it's an attachment or, for example, have they been watched since they were even a young child, or at a period in their life felt like they were under surveillance. I'm going to get a little deep here. Or maybe they were taken into a spaceship and they have vivid memories of that. Or they lived in a certain home and they sensed, 20 years ago that the energy was off, and things have never really been right ever since. I mean, they've done a lot of work, they've done therapy, they've done QEC, they've done so much to kind of like right the ship and rebalance themselves, and they're fine, but they're finding this taking a lot more effort to make it through day-to-day life than it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, almost every single person in some sense, has felt blocked
Mm-hmm.
or stuck in what it is they have a vision for doing, or what they feel like they should be doing, and they know, or they sense that they know that there's something more that they need to be doing here on Earth, but they've tried a lot of different things, but nothing is sticking, and they're just not really clear on what their path should be. So a little bit of that almost with everybody, I would say there's something that I just mentioned has been in every single intake. And then the first session is very consistent. We're removing a lot of gunk, whether it's attached spirits or even implants or devices that are within the person, some that have been there since childhood, some that have been recently implanted in the person. They don't know, or they do have a sense that something is off as recent as just a couple of weeks prior, or since when they were a young child, right? Other things, just them being attacked by people in their life that they had come across maybe years before, and had some sort of like a business relationship or even a personal relationship, and again sense that just something's just not right here, but they don't know what it is. chronic aches or pains in one side of the body, maybe like the left shoulder, for example. And then we find out that there actually is a female spirit on the left side of the body that's been there and attacking and throwing daggers at the person. So just a wide variety of things that we find in these energy clearings. And then the beautiful part is once we get rid of all the gunk, generally the second session, the follow-up session, is when most of the clients are able to connect with their guides and maybe even with their star family, their galactic family, and they start to make that positive connection and receive these really inspiring messages from their galactic family or from people in their life that have passed. And then they find out what their role really was in their life, and maybe they passed earlier than they should have or could have, and they realize, oh, this is the reason why. So a lot of things start to become clearer, and they start to also understand their purpose, why they're here, what direction they should be taking. So it's really it's a powerful process. And as you've alluded to, we do it as a team. So in the sessions, I'm navigating the session, directing the session, working with two other team members who are there to see and communicate, as well as the client, who will also be in the communication mode. So it's four of us on a screen like this. We're doing it remotely, and it's quite a powerful combination of talent and also just all of us being together for the same purpose, focused on that one client and clearing the energy and finding out what's important. And the other thing I will say is that in every session, I, as the person navigating it, will always want to know what the intention is from the client. What are the top things that you want to focus on and learn about and cover and address in this session? And we almost always get to everything. And then the messages start to come through without us even putting it there. So everything is it's very aligned, and it's very, it has a nice flow to it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah,
You're welcome.
you have really taken to the techniques that that we do, and
Didn't plan to.
we often say you just can't make this stuff up. We'll use
Can't
another
make it
S
up.
word. But it's so, like you're talking, extraterrestrials, and it is amazing what we are finding when we tap into that unseen world that you wouldn't normally see in a medical setting. Correct, Dr. Melanie? And yet it becomes very real to the person.
Yes.
Yeah, and I will say, and in a medical setting, and I'm not a doctor, but they may be just looking at the symptoms. And then there may be a prescription or a medication to numb the symptom, right? And then when we start going through these clearings and clients are saying, I've had problems my entire life with my shoulder, with my neck, with my collarbone. And it becomes so clear as to why that is the case. And it's nothing that could ever have been addressed by the medical profession. Just impossible, because it's not seen. It's not here. It's not here. It's in a different dimension, but it's very real. And the client was very much, shall we say, under attack.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly what it was.
And Julie, what was your experience, if you don't mind sharing with, well, let's start with the experience that you've had with Dr. Melanie.
Yeah, well, a real profound shift in the way that I showed up for myself in the world, and just a feeling of contentment. And I think you used the word hope at the beginning, just that there was hope and now moving forward in life, whereas previously that seemed to be lacking wherever you turned. There wasn't any hope. So for me, QEC got me to a really high level, I think, in the physical world. Yeah. And that stayed with me, and it's still with me. So very powerful experience to have done the QEC work, to have done the QEC training, and still be involved in, helping others with QEC. But I think the energy clearing was something completely different, because it wasn't something that I was expecting. I was very intrigued because Melanie had an energy clearing session, and then I thought, I think I'd quite like to know, but I didn't have anything specific. It wasn't like, I've got this problem, or I feel this, or I sense that, or but for me it was more about well, have I been here before? It's those past lives that I actually listened to one of your trainings earlier on, and I'm like, okay, that's coming from there. Perhaps it's previous people's past lives that are the spirits that are with me. That's what I'm bringing forward. And the second session, there was a spirit with me on the right shoulder, and I've had a problem with my shoulder for a long time, and you won't believe how improved it is. So I'm really thankful, and I'm very grateful for for having that shift. But I'm now very much learning more about, your work, Lois. As I said, I'm very intrigued on it. I'm doing sacred space every day, and I actually did it before this session because I'm finding it very powerful. So yes, I do feel that not one modality fits any one person. Everybody has a unique experience. So a word that I've more recently come into using is interwoven, that everything is interwoven with everything else, spirit, mind, body. And it's just so interesting to learn more about it, having not been as aware. I had a sense that there was something other than a physical body, but to just be more aware of it now and to be learning more. Yeah, everything's interwoven, and I love it all.
Well, thank you for sharing, and I thank you for bringing up the sacred space. I just want to share an interesting sidebar with you and the audience. I had the opportunity to do my first experiential session with Dr. Melanie yesterday, and there was we have some of these big woodpeckers that start pounding on the house, and I was trying to get into a quiet state, and this woodpecker was outside the window, just creating havoc. And I had to stop and say, I need to chase this bird away. I went and I pounded on the door and I yelled out the window, and it kept on going. And I sat down. I said, you know what? We need to set sacred space. Right? So the minute that I set sacred space simply and asked Archangel Michael, our buddy, to come in, it stopped. It went away. It shifted, didn't it? Wasn't that fun? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Love
I'm
it.
going to share one thing. A colleague of mine who I did some clearing work for, and then again, he was doing sacred space a lot, every day, I think. And it was a few months ago, and he said he was doing sacred space and he was putting the pillars of light up, and his cat was like, "What's going on here?" and ran out of the room. So it's real.
Mhm.
Woodpeckers, cats, doesn't matter.
All of it. Yeah.
Nasties.
Yeah, we're finding a lot of sorcery that's being sent to people, and witchcraft, that kind of stuff. Years ago, we were dealing with a lot of reptilians, and we don't see that as much now, but a lot of sorcery. People who are dabbling in this unseen world, and it's if you watch a lot of these media shows, and all of our children are being raised with dabbling in witchcraft, and it's scary because they don't really understand how dangerous it can be. And so a lot of what we find is helping to block the energy from things that are being sent. And it could be something as simple as someone sending a hate message or anger. As you're dealing with the emotions, the anger that is sent out, if it's directed to a person, just like the power of prayer to a person, they can feel it. If people send anger, that person will feel it. And it's very powerful. So what we're learning to do is direct and deflect and block that with the power of joy and love and positive energy. Keeping the energy positive is so critical. And that's a lot of what you're doing. A lot of what you're doing, from my perspective, is forgiveness work, right, Dr. Melanie? Most of it's forgiveness.
Yeah. May I ask, because I've been curious and I didn't quite know how to get an answer to this question, is what is the situation with devices being inserted? Because that's what happened to me. I mean, it was such a dramatic situation. Can I just share what happened to me? This is how I came to see you. And I'm fine with the public knowing this, I mean, because it's my truth. I had a couple of days of what felt to be an attack by a particular client who hadn't previously been much of a problem for the previous 3 months. And then all of a sudden there was a shift in energy from her, and she attacked me and was aggressive and called me all sorts of names. And it was unpleasant, but I coped with it. And one afternoon after one of these sessions, I went to have my usual nap. During that nap, I had an epileptic seizure. I was unconscious for 3 hours. I was alone in the house, so nobody could help me. When I woke up covered in blood. I'd bitten through my tongue, bitten through bottom lips, top lips, fell out of bed. I couldn't walk. I staggered, and I was supposed to work that night. I had to get help because I couldn't work. I was very, very, very worried because I thought, oh my goodness, I've got epilepsy. And of course, nothing like this had ever happened. I'm really healthy. And because I happened to talk to a friend who knows Scott, immediately I met with Scott and he said, no, this is a device. And of course, I don't know what a device is, but I was only too happy to meet him because I knew something was radically off. And the device that was removed was something that had been inserted in my jaw, and it was taken out from the side that I was still bleeding when I had the session. I had all the bite marks along the side. So I'm curious to know, how did that happen that included such a physical experience? Really curious.
Thank you for asking that. The interest in devices came about I want to say about almost 4 years ago. I went out on the Truth Tour talking about protection, that people are not being protected. And as I was out, started kind of going out in the public, talking about energy vampires and energy attacks, this brilliant gentleman approached me and said, you're communicating with the unseen. Have you ever investigated what happens to the millions of people who've been taken up in ships and they don't know what happened to them? Well, I'm always up for a challenge. So I said, well, I'll start asking. So in the process of doing just simple energy clearing, we started asking. Of course, I had never experienced this before. And sure enough, we started discovering devices. We've uncovered probably, I'm going to say 40 or 50 different types of devices that have been placed in people. So what we have discovered is that yours is a little bit different in that yours was recently placed. Dark energies have the ability to identify a light worker, a person who has a high vibrational signature in utero or as a small child. And what they want to do is to keep that individual from fulfilling their purpose in being here. Many of us are what are called star seeds. We are here to help this planet ascend and to help with the Great Awakening. We have that knowing deep in our soul, but we don't know how or why. There's just a knowing we have. Anyway, these individuals were often born into families who also had some level of connection with divine, but they were already targeted. Many of these have been targeted since the 40s, 30s, 40s. That's when the first experimentation with the devices happened. The devices were placed in them to create pain, to create disturbance, to create confusion, to block them from reaching a high vibrational state. To dumb down, to minimize the vibrational signature of the person so that they could not achieve their purpose in being here. They didn't want to kill them because they feed off of the energy of fear. The fear is what that is their loosh, their food source, but they could identify by the signature, vibrational signature frequency of an infant. So they were typically placed oftentimes in the bed while they were sleeping, or they were taken into a ship. Many of our clients have vivid memory of being in a ship and having these devices placed in them. And they were also used for harvesting eggs and DNA and for so many different reasons. But the whole intent is to keep the person from fulfilling their purpose, be it art, music, some way of contributing to helping this planet ascend, and each one is different. What the light workers, the devices that were placed to create some level, emotional, mental, spiritual, physical level of distress to keep the vibe down. And then once we started identifying these devices, we no longer just focused on the client. If there was a device placed in a client, we would, in the process of asking, is this a regional or a global? Because the same device was placed in many different people around different regions. And so we were working with the extraterrestrials. That's a whole other story. But they were given permission, working with Archangel Michael under his guidance, to go in and deactivate the devices in everyone who had that. So we were not just working on that client. If we found a device, how many other people are there? There are 1,000. Let's go help all 1,000. So many of these people are unaware that the change happened, but we've been healing, removing, deactivating devices around for several years. Yours,
Wow.
it seems as if, was recently put in, and so they are still attempting to put them in. And we actually had a client a couple weeks ago that we had removed or deactivated a device, and they had tried to reactivate the device. So there's still mischief going on. And the design is to take us off kilter, keep us from fulfilling our mission.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely fascinating. I must say that the impact of it in the few days before I actually had the clearance from Scott, the impact of it was that I was completely demotivated. I lost all interest in what I was doing. I was saying to my husband, I think I have to stop working. I don't want to carry on. I'm not interested anymore. I've never been like that. It really was profound. It
Yeah.
really was profound. It was very effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you
And I would,
imagine the number of people who have these and are just completely unaware?
Mm.
I'm sorry, Scott, what you were saying?
well, I was going to say, and that's exactly what they wanted. Whoever was responsible for putting it in, it's exactly what the goal was, to get you to stop working,
Mm-hmm.
to stop doing what it is you're here to do, number one. And as I recall, there were others that had similar devices.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a relative, very, very new device that Dr. Melanie had. And it was started over in Europe, in that region of the world, and it was expanding.
Mm-hmm.
So during that clearing, we also cleared a couple hundred others, as Lois said. So the work is so profound, the energy clearing work, because it's the client is helped, as well as hundreds, thousands of other people, and going back in time, we do a lot of ancestral clearing to take care of anything that might have been from, generations prior, not just related to devices, but
Beautiful
yeah,
things about the ancestral clearing and finding out that these devices have been placed in, for instance, parents, reading your book, and my parents were also dysfunctional, shall we say, at best. They had devices placed in them, which created disturbance in them, which is why some of their behavior was so odd and different. And when you get to the point of realizing that it wasn't their fault, it helps with the forgiveness. It helps with forgiving. It helps with, oh my gosh, they were just reacting based on something that was placed in them that was triggering them to behave these different ways. And it helps with resolving the guilt, the blame, the shame.
Yeah, yes, yes. Fascinating. Thank you so much for all that information. I mean, I could talk about this for hours. It's really interesting.
It is interesting, and it's fun to be able to talk with people who are open to hearing it, because a lot of people, we talk about this and they just gloss over and go, yeah, I don't get it. Right, Scott?
yeah, you definitely, the island becomes more remote for sure until you meet people or like this group right here, where you're like, oh wow, it's so refreshing, it's so comforting to be able to speak like this, and not be looked at like we're totally nuts.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
part of where some of your techniques are helping me, because I have a hard time talking about this because of um, the need to be perfect, the need to be right. All of those childhood issues that I have keeps me from wanting to be in the public spotlight. But the information that we have is so important to share. So as I'm healing my emotional trauma, then I'll have more confidence to be able to speak about this crazy world we live in.
Well, I'll certainly be sharing this video podcast with my community. I've got several hundred, and some of them are going to be very shocked to hear that I've had a device put in my mouth. But, I mean, it was my truth.
Hmm?
It was my truth. I remember saying to Scott on the session, Scott, look at my lip here. I've bitten right through it. This is no joke. I mean, this is no imaginary experience. This is real.
Mhm.
I mean, you couldn't be more, I couldn't have been more convinced of the before, the after. And the other thing is that since then, since the clearance, my life has just transformed. I mean, I've been pretty clear before. I had a pretty high vibration, and it's gone much higher
Nice.
and stayed much higher. And I'm so grateful for that. I really am. It's been a wonderful experience getting to know you guys.
Well, I just love the idea of having a team. I've often wanted to be able to send people. I recognize our limitations. This is our skill set, which is great, and yet people need that trauma. If they're still playing the trauma, we've released the spiritual aspect, but if the trauma is still playing in their head, they need to have someone to help abate that and to shift that. So having this, the ability to refer them to you, again, we work like you, everything is Zoom, it's global. So we work similarly. And I think that is going to be such a symbiotic relationship. So I'm really excited about this, be able to send people to you to help heal that emotional, and again, knowing about the the neurotransmission and the whole neural pathways, and how we need to reform new neural pathways. But you've got a unique way of doing that, and you're going to be hosting a webinar next week that people need to know about. I'll put the information in the description of the video, but they can sign up free. You're going to be talking all about QEC, correct?
Yes, yes. I'll be talking about, in essence, what it's about. And it's aimed at explaining to the general public basically what I do, and what's available for them. So thank you. I would love you to put that out.
We will, absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on in this world right now, everywhere, everywhere. There's a lot of healing that needs to happen. And that's what we've been instructed is that the time is now to help people, because people are becoming more aware of the need to heal, and looking for alternative or other sources for healing, because the traditional medical community, where we both come from, doesn't work for everyone. If you need surgery and you've got to have a finger repaired, absolutely. We need the medical community for some of that stuff, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah, you're absolutely right.
mhm. Scott, any last thoughts before you leave?
No, just great to see all three of you again. Nice to see you, Julie and Melanie. And it's a pleasure. And I look forward to continued relationships going forward and see how this, as we all work to do the same thing, which is to help with the awakening and to help heal.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Julie, do you have any last things you'd like to share?
I just think it's wonderful to hear about a possible collaboration on so many levels, and just that, opportunity to help humanity heal at all levels, in spirit. Yes, I believe that everything is energy. We are having, I think the saying is, we're having an experience in a human body, aren't we? But that's what we see in the 3D world. But it's really exciting to hear that collaboration and opportunities to work with different modalities and dovetail those, see how they are all interwoven. It's very exciting. So I'm looking forward to future developments and future learnings. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. And Dr. Melanie Salmon, any last thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, I'd like to share my gratitude for you inviting me and giving me an opportunity to speak and to ask some questions. I'm very grateful for the way my life has changed since the clearance. I'm very grateful for being helped, because if I hadn't been able to see you guys, I wouldn't even be working anymore. So I'm really just full of gratitude. And I'm also so full of new creative energy that I feel has come out of this, flowed out of this. And I'm just so excited and looking forward to opportunities to collaborate, as Julie says, between your business, your company, and my company, and our clients. And it feels like a very safe, trustworthy collaboration that makes sense, that we can come together, and I think it fits really well, doesn't it?
Yes.
So thank you so much. Thank you. And I will be sharing this podcast with my community as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you both. And again, deepest gratitude to you. And I am thrilled to be able to share your work with our clients and other people. So I often close with a simple statement until next time, look up, stay positive, and share the light with someone today.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.